Hello and welcome to episode 23 of Ways to Wellbeing. I'm Jess Szynski, and here at Partnerships for Wellbeing, planning is well underway for our festival of walking and wheeling. That's happening in May, and we're hoping around 30 walking, cycling and wheelchair groups in the city will be taking part. But as we've been developing plans for that festival, we've also been thinking about some of the key figures in Scotland who've been talking about the benefits of walking and cycling and simply keeping moving for many a year. One of them is a friend and former colleague of mine, John Beattie. Now, John's probably best known for his time as a rugby internationalist, but these days he presents the News Drive programme on BBC Radio Scotland. So this week I swapped the Ness for the Clyde to meet up with John and talk about his own approach to health and well-being. As you'll hear, our conversation ranged far and wide and included John's own fears about dementia and his confession about being responsible for putting a bridge in, well, slightly the wrong place. Thanks for speaking to us, first of all.
Pleasure.
Quite a long time ago, you were involved in a big initiative to get people keeping fit, I suppose.
Yeah, just briefly, it was the Physical Activity Task Force. So Jack McConnell, the then First Minister, asked if I would be the chairman of this task force to look at making Scotland more active. So we published a report in 2003, and when we started, I thought it was going to be all about rugby and press-ups and pull-ups and sprinting and jogging and marathons, and it wasn't. Every expert we got in from around the world, crystal clear, all the research said the biggest and best thing you can do is help a population walk. If you can get people walking, that's the single biggest step change in your life that you can have. So you 150 minutes per week. If you go from 0 or 100 to 150 minutes, that's the biggest step change. So all the targets then were to do with walking, making the population, and it was everybody. It's not just people like me at the time, 40 something. It was everybody. We decrease our activity the older we get. Young girls decrease their activity in their teenage years, and it was how to keep everyone just staying that little bit more active, and walking was the key.
It is fascinating, isn't it? Because on the podcast we've spoken to Professor Nanette Murtry at Edinburgh
I spoke
University.
to her today,
yeah,
purely by chance.
And she said, she uses the expression, you get the most bang for your buck in terms of walking. It sorts out so many other health problems.
It does, from things like osteoporosis. If you walk, you keep your femur a little bit more dense, so you're less likely to break your hips. It helps your heart tick over. It was the vanguard too of green prescriptions. So a doctor could prescribe you a walk or a membership of a gym or go walk in some trees. So it helps your mental health, it helps your physical health, it helps your lungs. I've got asthma, and the respirologist says you must jog. You must try and breathe using your lungs, and exercise them in a way that you wouldn't if you were just sitting down. So she knows, she's the expert. Biggest bang for your buck is walking.
Now, when you were involved in that campaign, you were just coming out of the end of your kind of sporting career.
A little bit.
Right?
I was still doing some sports, but you were my boss, and I was doing some sports broadcasting, but I was maybe in my late 30s then. So I hadn't played for about 10 years.
Yes. Now, is it the case that you've had a very active sporting career, in your case rugby, of course, you've done some damage to yourself?
Some damage. I broke my jaw, I did my neck in, I've got 2 sore shoulders, I've got disc problems in my back, I've got 2 hips that are sore. One's been replaced, the same Andy Murray operation, the resurfacing, which is actually a replacement. I've had operations on both knees, I've got 1 ankle. But if I wasn't exercising, they would have seized up. If you speak to Harry Burns, the former chief medical officer, there's a bit of research that even if you've got damaged joints and you exercise, you help them because you're lubricating them. So I've got a lot wrong with me, but even the analysis when it looks at rugby is you're better off having played rugby than not. Heart health, friendship, fun, and knowledge that you've got to stay fit. But yes, as you look at me, I'm a bit of a physical wreck.
No,
But that's fine.
you're looking
But that's fine.
you're looking in fine form,
But
John. I
that's
have to
fine.
say,
That's
I
fine.
was hoping the conclusion of that was going to be that those of us who have never really been in team sports or sporting of any kind
Oh,
have got more kind of longevity when it comes to walking.
probably. Like my father-in-law, Bill Dudgeon, who played for Gala in the 50s, had a terrible leg break and then didn't play any more sport. Has never jogged, has never done weights, has never played squash, tennis, never played golf, just walked all his life. He's 95, I think. And if I said to him, I was talking to Jeff Szynski, ex-head of radio, he's wearing a blue check shirt, dark trousers, and blah, blah, blah. And we had radio mics on. 4 days later, he'd give me it all back. So I think there is some evidence that there probably is evidence if you want to live longer. There's evidence if you play rugby, you will live healthier a little bit longer, but you'll die probably earlier than somebody who didn't play rugby. And you'll get dementia a little bit earlier given the head knocks. But I think, yes, yes, you will outlive me. Is that what you're saying?
I'm hoping. I'm hoping.
You will outlive me.
Having just turned 60, I'm hoping I've got another.
I'm pretty sure that the people out there who are in their 80s and they've just walked all their lives, they'll live longer than me. Yeah, well, I've battered myself.
Well, that's why we're having the festival,
right,
to encourage that as well. Now, walking isn't your only activity. I think you're still a keen cyclist, or have you packed that in?
No, I do cycle, but I don't like the whole lycra thing. I've never, I've passed the point in my life where I exercise to impress people, or to be super fit, or to have the best body, or to be the strongest and toughest. Because life's sport's a competition. Everything's a competition. You've got to win. You analyze yourself, and at the end of it, you've lost or you've won. And losing is really hard. My daughter is a professional footballer. My son was a rugby player, and winning and losing is a horrible thing. So I didn't want my cycling ever to be like my sport. So my cycling was just a mechanism to get to work and tick my heart over and have some fresh air. So I've never, I drive to work if I'm not feeling that great, but probably in 30 years now, I've not driven to work if I can avoid it. So I'll get the bus or cycle. And I like cycling because my brother cycles, my two brothers both cycle, and my middle brother, who's very eccentric. I don't mean that in a bad way, but he's a guy who his whole life is active commuting. You can sum up cycling and walking by the word freedom. And cycling is, you don't need to go up that road. You can go left a bit if you want. You go down the cycle path. You can think, I'll try a different route today, whereas cars stick on the road and they're sedentary. And if people feel powerful in their box of tin and they get angry, drivers get angry. I can't get through the lights. Cyclists, you're never going to go more than 20 miles an hour. Your heart's taken over. You're getting the fresh air. You can smell things. If you cycle in the countryside, you can smell the trees and the fields. So I love cycling. I just love jumping on a bicycle, repairing the thing myself.
So I've always loved cycling. Since I was a child, it's my thing. If you were to say, "What is your one sport, Jeff?" It would be cycling. But like you, not competitive.
No.
Not that. However, when my health took a bit of a knock a couple of years ago, and I was in hospital, and I came out, I got myself an electric bike because the advice was don't try and do too much. It was interesting, the attitude from my fellow cyclists that somehow I'd betrayed them.
No, you've got. I am 65 years old, and there was a wee thing we've got a great wee team on this program called Drive Time. Great team of really up for it people. It's like constant work, and they were, when I was off with COVID, they were all sending me videos of them all doing press ups. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some of them are in their 20s. Now, in my 20s, I could probably do 70 press ups, but now I can do 20-something press ups. And I think you've got to realize that when you get older, there's no shame in going, I can no longer run 10 miles, but I don't mind doing an electric bike. I've got pals who have electric bikes, and they tell me they can do things that you would never do on a bicycle. They can go up, around Loch Katrine on an electric bike, but they couldn't do it on a normal bike. Or they go mountain biking, which is uphills, but they can never do on it. And I think you've got to realize that comes a time in your life when trying to do what you used to be able to do and being upset and not being able to do it is meaningless. It's not a competition. Good on you having the electric bike.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say to you, you touched on mental health and
Yeah.
mental well-being. Now, you're someone, I was going to say, who've easily found a third act in your life, but probably in your case, a seventh or eighth act. You've changed your career quite a lot over the years. Can you recount some of the changes for us?
Well, I was my degree was civil engineering with economics and maths, and so I was one of the engineers that helped build the Edinburgh City bypass. And there's still a bridge in slightly the wrong place. This is true. I'm not making this up. It was a footbridge, and it was me. And there's a wall, but because I was an international rugby player, they didn't knock it down. Because I was international, it's 2 inches out. And you've got to accept that in engineering, the tolerance is 3 to 5 mil.
Right.
And this thing was maybe 25 mil out, and I'd set it up incorrectly with my line and level. I was I was the guy with the hat on, and it was in the wrong place.
Where is it?
It's in the city bypass. It's
Yeah.
one of the footbridges.
Right.
I'll tell you exactly where the big wall is that's out of place. If you if you drive from Maybury and you're heading and you're about to get to the bridge over at Collington, and if you look down, there's now a housing estate, modern houses, but it's Water of Leith Bridge. Come back 200 metres, look up to your right, there's a wall there that's slightly in the wrong place. That was me.
Are they going to name it after you?
I hope.
The John Beattie Wonky Bridge?
Undoubtedly, no. So I was an engineer, and every time I cycled to work, I remember being an engineer at the exhibition centre. So I was the guy, or one of the guys who did the floor slabs and the Arco tunnels and the drainage. And I can still remember back then you would take a Wednesday off to go and play international rugby. You'd take after work on a Wednesday, all of the staff would wave you bye-bye. And I can still remember leaving that site, November 84, frosty day, going to play Australia. And everyone wished me luck, and we lost by a record score. And the Monday I came back, and nobody spoke to me. I walked the length of the site, and I can still hear the shovels on the frozen ground. I can still hear bang, and not a single labourer spoke to me. Not a single member of my company spoke to me. And I just got to the site hut, and we had a guy called Whitey McNeil from Wishaw, who was bizarrely John Higgins' uncle, because he would tell us that John Higgins, his nephew, was a snooker player, and he would take his snooker. He was 10 years old at the time. Anyway, I'm thinking this is the worst day of my life, and walked the whole length of the site, thinking, shoulders down, lost to Australia, everyone hates me. We're a failure, we've let the country down. And the site hut door opens, and Whitey McNeil shouts out, "Beattie, you were rubbish on Saturday." And he said, "You especially." And that kind of brought you down to it. So that was my first career was engineering. Then my dad had a heart problem. And I remember him saying to me it turned out to be 2 weeks before he died, don't stick in a job you don't like. So hang on. I got carried off at Twickenham before the first World Cup. And I then thought, I'll give up engineering. Then I retrained as a chartered accountant. And I phoned a bloke I knew and said, "Look, I think I can pass the exams, take a risk on me." And he didn't believe me. And he said, "How much do you need to earn?" And I said, "Well, if you give me £8,000 a year, I can go to newspapers." I was doing a little bit with Radio Scotland in terms of, I think it was £26 a gig at the time. If you came in, you got paid £26 to comment.
It's not going up much.
And I started doing articles. And so I retrained. And then he offered me £7,000. Took the job, retrained, qualified as an accountant. Got a little bit uncomfortable with accountancy, helping people pay less tax. Then my father said, "Don't do stuff you don't like." And I phoned the BBC up and said, "Look, would you jointly fund half a trip if I go to the World Cup in '95, the Rugby World Cup?" And I phoned the Herald, and they jointly funded that trip. And from then on, I did broadcasting. Yeah, I've been lucky boy.
And now you're in news broadcasting.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring it up is because when I listen to you on the radio, what I hear is someone who still has a hunger for the job and a curiosity. And I'm wondering if that in itself keeps your mind going. you know, that sense of I'm desperately trying to get information out of people. It's not a confrontational style you
Mm.
have, but you generally have a thirst for knowledge, don't you?
You're being very kind. Sometimes I can be confrontational if someone's annoying me. But having played rugby, to go back to, you're talking about the mental agility.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, okay, well, Willie Stewart, who does all the research into dementia in rugby and concussion, always says that there are probably 8 factors that affect whether you're going to get dementia early. Genetics, blood supply, activity levels, whether you played rugby and got concussed, were you a boxer, did you play rugby league? There are 8 things, but then there are things you can do to slow it down. One of them is to keep your brain active. So I try and do the crossword.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up as a wee boy in the jungle of Borneo with my father, we were the only Scottish Scottish young couple in a rubber estate with pipe band music blaring out through the jungle. My dad telling me about what a great place Scotland was. And he always said, son, if somebody else can do it, you can do it. And we'd lie on our backs and look at the stars and remember the stars. There was always a kind of bizarre, my wife is, gets that, you've met Jill, and Jill is constantly annoyed at me for being so nosy and wanting to understand something. I had to do a address to the haggis the other day and I didn't understand it. So I had to go away and understand it. So I explained it, then did it.
Yeah.
And I saw you put something on social media about doing that.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it. So I learned what all the words meant and got the interpretation. And I can't, and I genuinely think on radio, I'm neutral because I actually don't have an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Half the time I don't have an opinion. I'm just interested in what these people think.
Yeah.
Whether it's somebody who's dying or somebody who's lost a relative or somebody who's got a political point to make. I'm genuinely interested because no matter what we see in life, somebody thinks differently, don't they?
Yeah.
Politics is based on confrontation, alternative views.
It feels like there used to be more room for those alternative views in the past than there is these days, where people are taking entrenched positions. I think, I don't know if you agree with that or not.
So I'm not allowed to comment on that, am
Yeah.
I? I mean, but I do think we often find things that divide us, whereas we're all humans. It's like the ownership of land, isn't it? How can you own land? When we all walked out of Africa 200,000 years ago, you can go up in Skara Brae and Orkney and you can look at Pictish settlements where they've had trade with Turkey, thousands of years ago. They've got spices that were shipped from Turkey. And here we are all arguing about stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's much more important that we get through stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what I think. Maybe I'm in the minority.
No, I'm with you. When I left the BBC, someone asked me if I would like to join their political party. And I said, like you have just said, I said, I'm sorry, but I've worked for the BBC for so long, I don't have an opinion anymore. No. And they said, that needn't matter. We can supply the opinions.
We can give you the opinion. So here's what to say.
Maybe that's how it works,
Here's what to say.
No, but you mentioned dementia once or twice, and I know you have a keen interest in the impact of head injuries on people who've had a sporting career. Yeah. And in fact, you've agreed to donate your brain to science afterwards.
I made a documentary on concussion and rugby just before the 2015 Rugby World Cup. On the back of that, I was called by various people in rugby an old woman, which I was quite proud of because my granny was head of Glasgow City Women's Police. So I've got some pretty tough women in my background. But the research is there that says if you can relate, you can join autistic kids with army veterans and American footballers, and they all have the same thing in common. They've all got slightly damaged brains. Given that some autistic kids can bang their heads against walls, some army veterans have had concussions, and sports people are. So it struck me that an awful lot of young men do things that aren't healthy for the brains. Think of the violence in schools among young teenage boys. Think of boxing. Think of rugby. Think of heading a football. And I thought, well, I've been a rugby player, and I've stood in a bar after a game blind, thinking, why can't I see? And I remember Willie Stewart told me when we did this documentary, that's concussion. And I've maybe had a handful of concussions. There's some research came out the other day saying 3 concussions might lead you to brain damage. So I thought, well, okay. But they've also done studies on nuns, and you can analyze nuns who appear to be very similar in terms of their cognitive abilities, because nuns, sew a lot, learn prayers, recount things, sing things, engage in communal activities. And then you analyze their brains, and one brain will be telling you this person actually had pretty advanced brain disease, and this person was okay. So you can protect your brain. You can protect your brain. I am worried in case I've got issues or my kids have issues, but I think there's no doubt that physical sport damages your brain, but you can do things to prevent it.
I was going to say thank you very much for talking to us, but
Pleasure.
before I leave you, I want to extend an invitation to you. Our Festival of Walking and Wheeling happens in May this year. You're more than welcome to come and pay us a visit, take part, join one of our walks, and see what's happening there. And if you want to bring your program with you, do that as well.
Well, that would be nice. If we can do it, we'll do it. I do genuinely, as a bloke who spent his life thinking it was all about sport. I said to you earlier, I thought the secret to health was for everyone to be in a sports club or a jogging club. 20 odd years ago, I quickly, having spoken to experts, realized it's about walking and cycling. It's active commuting. So if I'd love to do it if I can, Jeff. I'd love to.
Okay, we'd love to see you there if you can. John Beattie, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.